So we've alluded to it a few times on the channel, but we are currently running a Fate Grand Order themed Dungeons & Dragons campaign privately. We might eventually do something with it on the channel, but I don't feel right running it for the channel at the moment with how much borrowed art we have to use since we are too broke to afford that many assets and too unskilled at art to make anything worthwhile on our own. I also need to strip the copyrighted music I use to go with the campaign, so if it ever does make the channel, it'll be something wildly different, I think. In the meantime, though, Seki has asked that I maybe do something on the channel as sort of a fun show of what we have been talking about lately. So fuck it. I'll talk about what we have at the moment. Let me introduce you to the creatively named Fate Grand Order and Dragons. Yes, the name is dumb. I know. So we're running the campaign under a heavily modified system of D&D 5e. Why D&D, you might ask? Why not something more urban fantasy friendly like Call of Cthulhu or White Wolf, or even a modified Pathfinder? Well, the answer is simple, you see. It's what we know how to play. We have all played plenty of D&D thanks to an old friend who introduced us all to it, but we have done very little to learn and play other systems. Beyond that, I have my brother's assistance in a lot of this, although he is far more experienced in the wider tabletop landscape than I am. So as inefficient and sloppy as it can be, we are running a 5e homebrew. That said, the system is heavily modified. My brother and I basically made classes from scratch and changed the rules of how magic works. We banned all traditional D&D classes. Hell, servants operate under a completely different system than normal D&D does. So in practice, it really only borrows the character sheets, the combat system, the spells, some magic items, some monsters from D&D, and the rolling mechanics. The rest was made by scratch and is being refined as we go. In fact, one day when I have time, I may even go back and convert everything into a custom tabletop game and just turn it into its own system. We did design this campaign as a good springboard into designing other Type Moon-based D&D games, besides the Grand Order setting. Being honest here, the entire making of the campaign started as my brother and I asking, what if we made a Holy Grail War Fate tabletop game? Then we realized we didn't want to actually make a billion servants for a gacha that may never get used. We also didn't want to just design our own servants and purposely avoid the ones our friends would actually recognize. So we settled on adapting FGO's story and setting into a D&D format. That way we'd have a reason to make that many servants, so as we go we can introduce new player systems that could be used for further campaigns. The story is pretty much a literal adaptation of Fate Grand Order. All of the story chapters are being written into a D&D format, playing around with various ways we can run a campaign. In fact, it allows us to shift the very way we handle progression between chapters, so on one day we might be running a city urban fantasy game, on another we'll be on a boat. We are even adapting most of the game's events loosely. At the time of writing this, I've written the campaign for all the way through part 1 of the FGO mobile game, and we've already made the first 4 main chapters of FGO playable. If everyone enjoys it enough, I may continue into adapting part 1.5 and 2, but that's certainly a ways out. So making the servants, oh boy. Perhaps the most time-consuming thing is the raw amount of servants we have to design in D&D terms. We have it down to something of a science, though. Strength is, well, strength. Agility is dexterity. Endurance is constitution. Magic power is intelligence. Noble phantasm ranking is wisdom. And luck is charisma. Each letter rank results in an additional 2 to a stat added into 10. HP is directly related to con. A servant's base HP is 150 plus 50 times the constitution stat, with an additional 50 for each level past 1. Speed is 30 plus 5 times the dex stat. This is far from a perfect conversion, and we do switch some of these around though, just to better reflect certain characters. The skills of a servant are directly designed based off of the existing lore for the skill. Where none exists, we do our best to fill in the blanks based on name, or we build it around the kit of the servant. Some skills are locked to specific levels to add incentive for raising a servant level. Servants can only level up to level 5 and gain levels after completing each chapter or mini-chapter of the story. Certain items can also increase level. Anything past 5 needs a Holy Grail, just like in the game, for reaching the level cap of a servant in the mobile game. In a non-FGO campaign, this level would likely be directly related to the master's stats, and be unchangeable. Finally, attacks are based off of the attack animations in FGO, FGO Arcade, and the Fate anime overall. Unfortunately, this is probably the most arbitrary part of the servant making process, so it runs through the most balancing. Some spell-related servants get stuck with existing D&D spells, while others are given more unique spells, but a much smaller toolkit. Making characters, on the other hand, is more complicated than I want to get into at this moment. We designed characters to all be spellcasters for the most part. Each of the classes are based off of different sets of circumstances in Fate lore. Mages in particular tend to be locked to particular styles of magic, or magecraft, making them more reliant on team play for some things. Other classes exist that are constantly ironed out, but it would take us far too long to go over that now. Maybe one day I'll do a full video explaining them if there's any interest, though. Players are strapped with various level locks depending on the chapter. This limits how strong a character can get prior to certain points in the story. There's also various systems of investment into characters that make them a little more durable in the face of servants. Not much, though. Even our most durable player has nearly died to noble phantasms, and a servant would easily sweep any player given enough time and focus, thanks to how high their hit values can get alongside skill leveling the playing field. So, I thought I'd quickly go over what a character might look like here. Earlier I brought up that the spells were limited. The most restrictive spell list, or the most basic way I could explain it, is here. One of the subclasses I have for mages is Necromancer. It literally just means that, and this is Realm's character sheet, by the way. The only spells Realm has access to are necromancy spells outside of, I think he might have mage armor in here because of a red spell scroll, but spells he can just learn naturally are only going to be necromancer. And then other things here is, you'll notice I have down here the custom mystic code. That's some of the ways they can balance out their HP. I'm shaking the mouse here. And yeah, and then their HP gets a little bit higher because they can invest quartz into upgrading their own character a little bit. In practice, this probably does defeat the purpose somewhat of the level 5 cap, but on the other hand, I kind of got tired of the characters getting one-shotted by servants so easily. So there's that too. Other than that, it looks probably like a D&D character sheet here. Just basic spells, armor class based on armor, and items.
Unlike some of the other characters that you could show our lovely viewers, who look significantly less D&D-esque.
I'm sure we show it a little bit in some of the edits going through when I'm discussing the character creation, but I might as well pull up fucking Okita here. Not just Okita, fucking Okita. Like, that is not particular D&D. Like, the weapon down here does not actually associate with any attacks. These are all just custom attacks built as if they're unarmed strikes with stupid additions like +8 here. And no one rolls a 1d30. This dice doesn't even exist. This is not something that can be run without the use of an online roller. At the moment. One day, maybe. And then, as I described earlier, you can see how the stats lay out. I'm sure if you compared this to the stats side by side, which you'll probably see elsewhere in the video, either before or after this, if you look up Okita, this should match my description earlier. I don't think Okita had any crazy alterations. Actually, she did. Let me quickly... There you go. That should match Okita's stats now. So far, we all seem to be enjoying it, but the biggest kink I need to iron out with this system is what I call the Pokemon problem. Something FGO the mobile game does its best to get around. Servants I make, the players fight, will in most cases be a tool also accessible to the players. So designing things to be truly challenging can be difficult. This has forced us to introduce various means of balancing the game slightly less in the player's favor. One day, once all the kinks are ironed out, and I've had time to edit the campaign, I'll probably end up putting the entire thing on a public Google Drive. But one can only hope we get that far. And there you have a very brief introduction of how we go about running our Fate D&D campaign. Something that you could do given a year of development time, I think. Shoot me. But also, before you shoot me, remember to like, comment, subscribe, and maybe share our video if you want to expose how much of a fake Fate fan I am. Try harder, everyone.